You see what we do here at ULP, I'm giving you also, we've been inviting so many people. Most of them, I know them personally. Some of them are my personal friend. But some of the people here, particularly mentees, are saying, look, I know somebody I think he should come. And then Akona said to me, look, let's get this Phuti. And I said, no, I know Phuti very well. So well done, Africa. Thank you. And you've been watching the DVD earlier on, Ian Fear, the Sobe. I did not know Sobe. And I made a mistake speaking in front of my daughter. She says, what is Sobe? She says, Daddy, come on. You're embarrassing us. You know, Sobe is such a well-known. And my friend Dave recommended him. And now we also saw him speaking to us. So welcome, everyone. Special word of welcome. You know, today we're visited by pastors, Pastor Msweu and Pastor Mabusela. So it's great to have also the blessing. So we're blessed. That's why it was rainy, you know. We're blessed to have you. It's great. And ULP is, please come in. And ULP, let me also greet the people in Durban. It's amazing how ULP is growing. Dave, we've got online now, people in Durban, you're welcome. We've also people in Polokwane that are watching us online, welcome. And also people in Secunda, welcome. And I don't see Windmill. Is it on? Oh, they are here. There's Windmill is here. No, you're not online there. So we've got 3 people online there. So next time, if you've got a province, you're coming from Eastern Cape or KwaZulu-Natal or wherever, and you want to organize a group of people that will be mentored through this program, you can organize them and we can connect you online, and so that you can have the benefit of hearing all the wisdom that comes from the speakers that comes here. Right. The problem with technology, you always have to check it out. So before we start and introduce the speaker, I always like to share some few thoughts, particularly to my mentees that we mentor regularly, that I speak to you, and I'm glad to see most of you that are here. I want to just say one of the most important things that we promote at ULP is higher purpose leaders. We don't want leaders that thinks about I, Mina, and myself. Are you with me? And when you hear a person using I, then you get worried. I get worried. Because then it means you don't think about the higher purpose. What is it that you want to do? What difference you want to make? Even when you're in an organization, what is the higher purpose of your own organization? What is the higher purpose of your own company? If you're an entrepreneur here, what is really the higher purpose of your own company? Until you figure that one up, you're going to have a problem. And they have got 4 points I just want to make on that one, then I'll hand over to our speakers. Take your notes around that. Higher purpose leaders face reality. They do not minimize problems. They face them head on. They assess the situation very well. Dave and I are working on a big program, which one day we'll launch here on National Mentorship Movement. And we've spent the last 2 years assessing the problem and assessing the solutions that we're going to be delivering. And you don't overpromise. And we said we're not going to launch it until we're absolutely sure the technology works. And that's what higher purpose leaders do. But more importantly, reality doesn't scare you. You start envisioning the future. You start thinking about what is the future, and then envision it and see it and perceive it and actually paint the picture of it and make sure that the people and team that works with you see also the picture of the vision that you have. If it's like a canvas, you can put it and see it, and that's critical. And then you set worthy goals, goals that are very clear, goals that are highly ambitious, but not only just for yourself. Goals that covers the marketplace, covers the community, covers the industry in which you operate, and the workplace. So you set the holistic goals, and it's very important when you set goals that they must be holistic. If you're a higher purpose leader, sometimes we just have metrics that we use in business which are purely financial, and I can spend a lot of time around that. But this is very important. And then finally, that's why our program director always says, I insist on values. There are things you cannot compromise on. And higher purpose leaders, there are things you don't compromise on. And those are the values that guide you, values of integrity, values of your higher purpose, values of the moral compass, values of where you are going. So, you've got that. That was a short snippet of the 4 points for today, for you, food for thought, particularly for those that are mentoring. When I meet you, I'll be asking you about these points. So write them down and tell me what you're doing about them in your personal life on those points. Thank you very much. Today, we are really privileged to have a woman of substance, a woman of significance, and a lady that has really made a huge impact in this nation. And it's very important that we know who she is. And I'm very glad that there's a lot of young ladies here. It's always important to know and get. And as I say, there's a difference between, I've seen my wife. There she is now. Yeah, I see. I always want to make sure that she's here. So can I give you a round of applause? Let me tell you where she's very educated, and it's very important. Education is important. Some of the challenges we're having in this country today is because we have undermined the importance of education amongst our leaders. So she's educated. She's got a BA Economics from the United States of America, Rutgers University, an MBA from De Montfort University in the UK, and has been in the Kennedy School of Government and attending an executive program which is linked to Harvard University. And has been a leader growing up, which I really like, vice president at Philstone, head of project finance in South African business. And the most important part, started in Shanduka. I think that's where her major breakthrough came as a managing director at Shanduka Energy. So we interacted a lot when she was building that part of the business on energy. I remember we also did a lot of work in Mozambique, gas to power with her, and she became the CEO of Shanduka Group as a whole, which was a very successful group under the leadership of our current Deputy President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, and it became very successful. I liked also the Shanduka Umbrella program, which was promoting small businesses, and when our Deputy President decided he wants to really now focus on his final mission in life, being the president of this nation, he decided, correctly so, make sure that he distanced himself from any business interest and in terms of governance, and sold all the Shanduka interest. She's involved in what we're doing here, mentoring and young professionals and students, so that's great. Very involved also in global young leaders, very important, and is also a patron of National Education Empowerment Trust. She serves on a number of directorships. Some are current, maybe some of them may not be current. You need to correct me, but Lawn Mill, yeah? The last three are current. The last three are current, Blue Label, Telcoms, Come, and Renault. The others are previous ones that she said. So we're bringing a leader here who's seasoned, who's been a business person, and let's give her a round of applause. The ladies wants to stand up for her. You see, you've got admirers. Stand up. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so humbled. I'm really so humbled. As I was sitting there, I was thinking that as a young girl growing up, I never could have thought that I could have a room full of leaders like this, applauding me like this. And it really just speaks to the grace of God. Yeah. You know, sometimes when we look at ourselves, we don't see what He has imparted in us. You know, and that's why it's so important. One of the things that I love to do is to go and speak to young people, so that they are connected to who they truly are. Because if you have a voice, whether you see or not, whether you can walk aided or unaided, as long as you are breathing, there's a purpose for you being here. And so what is that purpose? It's important that you live out that purpose. But before I go any further, I'd like to start by khudumedisa baruti and but really thank you very much for having me here. It's truly wonderful. I honestly started off there because it's just been so amazing for me. I grew up with parents who never went to church or anything. But the interesting thing was that they instilled within us the knowledge and the importance of faith. And these were not people who went to church. But they insisted that we go to church. So every Sunday we would have to go to church. But it was such an important thing because later on in life, as one was developing in my career and all of that, I started to see just how important it was to have that. Because when you're a leader in an organization, you can't always speak to someone or to a group of people about many issues that you face, as a leader. And so there many times comes those periods of times where you just actually have to kneel and pray for the right solution to come to you. Because when you speak to people, there are many options. There are always many options. But it's about finding that correct solution that will have the right outcome. And believing that it will have the results that you want to see. And so I've been very thankful to have been able to lead that path. So as I was saying, growing up as a young person, my mother passed away when we were still very young. And so my father, having, developed and grown up in, apartheid South Africa, was very regimented in how we should focus and all of that. So hard work was an important area for him that he valued very much. So he instilled that within us very, very quickly. And I remember him, calling me into his study and sitting me down and saying, and, my father had this thing where he'd speak to us in English, except when the relatives were there. Then he'd change to Deep Sepedi. And then we'd be a little bit confused because we're growing up in Soweto where, nobody speaks any pure language. You speak a mixture. But I remember he called and he wanted to know what it was that I intended to do. And I rubbed my head. I wasn't quite sure. And I told him, well, Dad, I've given this a lot of thought. And what I would like to do is to become a ballerina. And he looked at me and he said, I see. He said, okay, this is what you're actually going to do. And he had my entire plan planned out for me. He told me you're going to do a Bachelor of Economics at Rutgers University. He had already applied. And he told me, you just have to write these tests and you have to get this mark minimum so that you can get in. And then, he said, then after that, you're going to go to the UK. I want you to do an MBA. And then he had a list of organizations that in his view I should work for. So essentially he had my entire career planned out for me. All I had to do was just do it. And at the time it was a bit, the only thing that excited me was the opportunity of actually going to study overseas. I was 17 when I did my matric, so it was very exciting to go to the States and go and study there. But it has been a journey. It truly has been an amazing journey. So I studied and, did all the things that I was supposed to do. So in as much as parents can want us to do certain things, you have to buy into it yourself as well. And so, that was a process. And I remember after completing my first degree, everybody was excited, saying, you know, this is what they were going to do and all of that. And I was thinking, what do you do with an economics degree, you know? And I was thinking, I don't want to be an economist or any of that, you know? What am I going to do? And anyway, so that was a process. But it was when I was doing my thesis on my MBA that I then started to think and formulate exactly what it was that I wanted to do. And it was such an important part because you have to buy into what you're doing. You know, after all, it's your career. And so I did that, and that's when I decided to leave. So when I'd completed my undergraduate degree, I had come back to South Africa, started working, and then I did my master's degree, went away, then came back again. And when I decided that I wanted to now follow what I'd thought about in terms of, you know, what I'd studied with my MBA, and my thesis was very much focused on looking at, you know, South Africa, the opportunities within South Africa at that time, and that was in the early 90s. I started to think about, and my thesis was essentially on the impact of Black economic empowerment on the economy of South Africa. And I won't tell you what I said in my thesis. I'm glad that was never turned into a book because I'd be very embarrassed now. But anyway, so I then completed that, and upon completing it, was working for an organization, great organization, and I had actually moved to Cape Town because I wanted to have my own identity. At the time, my father was, you know, a well-known businessman, and, you know, I think for those of you who've got parents or somebody close to you, you know, for the daughters of, you know, Ntotegatev as well, I would say, I'm sure you can understand that as you grow, you don't want to be, it's not that you don't want to be associated, but you want to be able to develop your own identity. And so I was looking for that. And so I moved to Cape Town. And indeed, Cape Town, you know, nobody, you know, had, you know, heard of my father's surname or anything like that. So it was a great place to start. Except I very soon encountered a problem. In this job, it had a great title. I had a great office. I was receiving great perks, all wonderful things, except there was no work. There was essentially no work. So all I was required to do was just to be there, you know? And I remember many times asking my boss, sorry, Richard, I think you know, I just want to understand, just in terms of my role, because all I seemed to be doing were more like PR things of just whenever there'd be newspaper articles or whatever, there'd be pictures to be taken. I'd need to be in those pictures and things. But apart from that, there was nothing of substance that I was doing. And so I started to wonder about this. But it became very clear to me that this was a job that had been catered for someone who looked like me, but there was no real confidence in the capability that I would bring into that job. And so I had to make a very quick decision. One, I could very quickly decide that that's great, relax, take it easy, and just earn my money and, you know, live my life and whatever. But it wasn't enough for me. And you know, nobody can tell you what you're supposed to do. You know, it's inside of you. And many a times you will have a dream or a thought inside of you that appears too big to you. And so when you share it even with people who care about you, they may even tone it down. They'll do it out of love because they don't want you to be disappointed. You know, they'll say, yes, you know, I think it's wonderful that you want to become an astronaut or you want to become this amazing scientist or whatever the case may be. But you know, there's this great job at such and such a company. You could earn this and all of this, and you could have a nice house, and you could, you know. And many times it's so easy for people to fall into that. The most important thing that each and every one of us can do is to have the courage to live that which is within us. And so, in that time, I'm very thankful that I had come from a family where I had that ability to have that courage. So I left my job, and before leaving my job, I decided I was going to apply to a company in the US. And this company was quite surprised, I think, when they got my application. The first time I didn't actually even get a response, so I applied again. In those days, we didn't have email. I don't think we had email then, because I remember it was a lengthy communication process. Not to say that I'm very old, I'm actually very young. But so I kept on communicating, and eventually they came back to me. They said, it's very nice. Thank you very much. It's wonderful that you are applying here. We're not looking for any applicants from the African continent. However, when we do, we will be in touch with you. So don't worry about getting in touch with us again. We will be in touch with you when we look for African people. So I waited, I really did. A few months passed and I never heard from them. So I thought maybe they forgot. So I thought, what can it hurt to apply again, And this has been another important lesson for me, that you don't give in when you believe in something. I saw this as a break for me. A break, an opportunity. It didn't look like an opportunity, because essentially I was going to be leaving South Africa from a management role where I was earning a lot of money, and I was going to be going to do an internship. I was going into a 6-month internship where there was absolutely no, there was no undertaking that I would be employed in the company. The only undertaking was that I'd have an internship. But I jumped for it, and I kept on applying. Anyway, so eventually they said, look, we see that you keep on applying. And they said, look, we don't have any jobs that we are looking to, bring anybody from the African continent for in the company. What we do have is an internship, but we don't expect, because they expected me to quickly say no, we don't expect you to say yes to an internship. You're already in a management role and all of this. You should continue, add value in your country. This is wonderful what you're doing, continue with that. And I said, thank you very much, I'll take the internship. And they said, okay, you need to understand, we don't pay a salary on this internship. We pay a small stipend, and you've got to find your own accommodation, you've got to find your own way of coming here, and within 6 months, you need to go back to Africa. That's important, because because I think there was a concern that maybe I was looking for a way to go and live in America. So I said, no, absolutely, I promise, I just want to come for that period, and when I'm done, I'll definitely come back to South Africa. Anyway, so I went to New York. It was very scary trying to understand the underground system and all of that, and I got myself in the company. What I hadn't expected was that all the other members of the intern on the intern team would be people from all these Ivy League universities. I was the only one who was not coming from any Ivy League university. And that in an American organization, certainly back then, it made you stand out quite a bit. So the result was that I wasn't getting any work. So as interns, you're dependent on people to give you work from time to time so that you can grow in that period of time. But I wasn't getting any work. And so I decided that I'd go and introduce myself. And I looked at the partners in the company, and there was one lady, she was a black woman, and I thought, yes, that's it, I've got it now. So I went to her and I introduced myself. When I went and I knocked on her door, she was on the phone, and I went outside, I waited, I went into her office when she was done, and I introduced myself. Hello, my name is Phuti Mahanyele from Africa. I'd, like to introduce myself and, find out if there's anything that I can help with and all of that. And she looked at me and she said, I'm sorry, maybe you lost. The interns are just down the passage, so you've got to go. And she was speaking very slowly. I think she was worried that maybe I wasn't catching on to every word. After all, I was from Africa. So, she told me how to get back to my team. So that was a very clear no. So I went back, and it took a lot of guts to build up the ability to go to any other partner after that. But, a few months, probably like about a month or two later, I was just in the office, and I always used to stay late. Even though I didn't have a lot of work, I'd stay late, like I was looking, when you're looking for an opportunity, you're looking for that thing, you can't term it. And this partner came by, he was busy with something. He said, look, I need this done. I've got this, deadline. I need this done by tomorrow morning. So I need you. Do you understand numbers? Do you understand how to do evaluation? Okay, I need you to do this, and all of that. And I said sure, and I did that. And I remember it was work that would typically take you like maybe 20 to 30 minutes. I spent hours on it because I wanted to be absolutely sure that this was correct. I took it back to him, and his name was Andrew Capitman, and I was very scared of him. He was one of these partners that we were mostly scared of. And he was happy, and then he gave me something else. And it developed into a relationship. Very soon we were working together, and because he was working with me, other partners and other directors in the company started giving me work as well. And it taught me something else, that you should never define who your benefactor or your support is going to be. It does not necessarily need to be somebody who's the same sex as you, who's the same race as you, who's the same anything as you. But it's just finding that person who will be able to support, and it is such an important issue to be able to grab onto. So for me, that helped me significantly. And so I was able to then get the help, get started and work really hard. And in fact, it worked so well that by the end of that internship, I was offered a job in the company. I was one of I think there was maybe 3 of us out of the whole group of about 20 interns that were offered jobs. I was offered a job, and I ended up working for the company for about 7 years. When I left the company, I was already vice president in the organization, and it was my faith walk, because it didn't make sense at the beginning. And I remember, when I was leaving for New York, and, even my family were asking me, but Phuti, you're a manager here, you drive a nice car and all of this. What are you doing, this internship thing, I mean, you've already studied there. You don't need to go and, but it worked so well for me. And I remember while I was there, and things work in interesting ways. I had people who would come from South Africa while they were on business in New York. They would come and offer me jobs there. And I kept saying, no, thank you very much. Because I believed that I would know when the right opportunity would come along. And so when I came back to South Africa, I then was very keen to work for a South African organization, and I immediately had offers from the IDC, from DBSA, and I took the DBSA offer because it was in an area that I'd worked on in non-recourse financing. And so, and I did, and it was a wonderful opportunity, except that it wasn't the right place for me. Not because it was a bad organization, it's a great organization, but it wasn't the right place for me. So I was the kind of person, having worked in the environment that I'd worked in New York, I was used to working long hours and, all of this. And all of a sudden I was finding around 5 o'clock, people were disappearing. So I was thinking, okay, maybe there's a meeting somewhere and I didn't see the email or, what's going on? And I remember calling one of the people in my team and saying to him, is there a meeting somewhere? I seem to have, I missed it. Where is it? Because I don't see anybody around here. And he said, no, I'm not aware of any meeting. I'm actually at home. But anyway, and I then realized time after time that, okay, this was sort of the time when people went home. And I immediately thought that I had the worst team. Because at that time, I hadn't been developed. Sometimes you can grow in a career. You are good at what you do, but as a leader, you haven't yet developed. And that's who I was then. I was very good at the work that I did, but as a leader, I was very poor. So I immediately, because things were not the way that I was used to them being, I assumed that everybody was just, not making an effort. So I had basically just about 90% of my team on disciplinary hearings. Until I was called in, by my boss into her office, and she said, Phuti, is there a problem? And I said, well, there appears to be. I don't understand. I mean, I have the least motivated team. I mean, how could this happen? And she looked at me and she said, Phuti, do you need to take some time off? Are there issues you need to deal with? And I couldn't understand what she was talking about. But then, later on, I realized that I was in a different type of environment. And for someone like me who was used to working long hours, and it wasn't the place. This was a place where people lived balanced lives. And, I should have learned that lesson then. Unfortunately, I didn't. So I continued looking for other people like me. So at that time, I was on my way to Standard Bank, and that's when I met, actually I'd met already Rowan Smith a few years ago, and years earlier, and he wanted me to come and join what was called MCI then, Millennium Consolidated Investments, which was then called Shanduka later on. And so I wasn't interested. I said, I was going to Standard Bank, and, because I had decided that, I think maybe I need to go into a Standard Bank. Maybe Standard Bank will be the right sort of environment for me. Anyway, I then went, they called me, the people from MCI, and I'd been telling them, no, not interested. And then one day he called me, and he had the deputy president, who was the chairman of the company at the time. And he said, just hold on one second, and he handed over the phone to him. And I was just so amazed. Here was somebody that I'd only seen on TV, and he said, look, I'd like to just meet you. I've heard about you from, my colleagues. I'd like to just meet you. And so, of course, I said yes. And the very next day, I went to his office, and I met with him there. And throughout that meeting, he never spoke about work or the job or anything. He just wanted to know about me and my family and all of that. At the end of that meeting, I decided this is where I want to work. Another decision that didn't follow logic, but it made sense to me. Just like when I decided to go to New York, it was once again something that I just knew that this is where I wanted to be. And at the time, I would speak to my father for advice on everything. So I remember speaking to my dad and saying, Dad, that job at Standard Bank, I've decided to not pursue it. I'm going to join this company called MCI. And my father said, MCI? Are they listed? I've never heard of them. And I said, no, Dad, they're not listed yet. Maybe they will be one day, but they're not listed. And he said, but Standard Bank, do you know Standard Bank? Standard Bank, you get a salary every month. You get a pension fund. You get medical aid. What are you thinking, And so it took a bit of time with my dad, but eventually, he agreed. He said, okay, that's fine. You decide. He said, if, you can make that decision, but just don't come to me telling me you need money because this company is not paying you anymore. Just, you're on your own on this decision. But fortunately, I took the decision, and it was unbelievable. It was wonderful. It was a company that was just starting. Everything was still up in the air. But for me, it just made sense. I was around people who were hard workers, who were hungry, who, and I could relate to that. And so we worked hard together, and it was wonderful. And we were able to, grow our organization into a hugely, a significant organization. And at the time, and we, and I was very thankful for that. It was wonderful to be in that environment. But, once again, it showed to me just that importance of that faith, knowing when something is the right thing to do. But anyway, so I did that, and it was wonderful. And so I stayed at Shanduka for 11 years, and in the last 4 or 5 years, was the group CEO of the company. It was wonderful. I loved working for that company. It was a company I could have worked at forever. But of course, the ANC decided to call our chairman, and so things sort of changed a bit, and our shareholders wanted to change things at the company. So anyway, I then thought, so at that time, I'd started getting sick. I would get these headaches, and I was somebody who never got sick. But I started getting these headaches, and I couldn't understand what that was about. And I remember every time I'd go, and I'd been told to go and see a neurologist, every time I'd go and see one, they were always late. Like, I don't know if you get this, but you go and see a doctor, appointments for like 10 o'clock, and like 20 past 10, you're still waiting to go into the doctor's rooms. And so in my work environment, I couldn't do that. So I'd always have to leave because I had something else. So anyway, the long and short of it is that I never got to see a doctor. And so one day I had a meeting in London, and I had this intense headache. And I thought, well, I'll go shopping. It will take away the headache. I went shopping, and unfortunately what happened was that I collapsed in the shopping center. And so the long and short of it is that that's when I found that I'd actually had a stroke and all of this. I think the scariest part with the stroke was the loss of my memory. Now, when you work in whatever environment you work in, it's amazing how much information we store mentally, and you don't even realize it. There are things that you just know, it's just part of your vocabulary. But all of a sudden, it was all gone. People that I knew, I didn't know their names. I knew their faces, but I didn't know if I knew them because they were family or because I worked with them, or, I couldn't quite remember very well. Anyway, it took a long time, and I remember whenever I'd go and see my neurologist, he'd have to explain to me why I'm there all over again. But I'm very, very thankful that I did, get healed. It was a 3-year process of regaining my memory, which, was obviously, very, very tough. But I was so thankful for my family. Honestly, my family, whom I had never had time for. In the past, I always had something else to do that was more important than spending time with my family. And I learned the importance of spending time with my family, because in that time, they shielded me. No one knew that there was anything wrong with me until I was okay. And when I was okay, I was able to talk about it in the way that I'm talking about it now, because, I was healed and I was fine. But during that time, they completely protected me. And this very family that I never had time for. And so I learned the importance of family. I was the type of person who never had time to go to family functions. There was always a flight to catch. There was always somewhere more important to go to. But I learned the value of family, the value of good relationships. I had friends who came and, I've never been someone who has a lot of friends, but, I have 2 friends and they came to my house and they were praying for me, praying very hard, and my family and all of that. And I'm just so thankful for having had them in my life. And, when I look back, I think to myself, this must have been a lesson for me, because I don't see how I would have ever stopped. Because when you live a life where you work hard, and there's nothing wrong with working hard, but there does come a point where you work exceedingly hard, but you don't see it because it's your normal. And where it starts to show is when you don't have time for family events or anything personal that's important, because you are always servicing this other area that's of more importance to you. But anyway, I'm very thankful for having been able to get through that and still be able to have my family with me and all of that. But when I look back on the days at Shanduka, even though we stopped the business, so we sold off many assets, and then the mining assets we then transferred with our shareholders, Standard Bank and the CIC, the Chinese Investment Corporation, to Pembani. When we did that, the good thing was that we remained with the foundation. Now, when we started Shanduka, in those early days, I remember when we were launching Shanduka, and at the launch, the chairman stood up and he said, and I'd like to announce that Shanduka Group is going to be making a donation of 100 million to the foundation. And I remember at the time we were probably worth about just under 40 million rand. So I was very worried. I was thinking, we've got people from the media in the audience, and the chairman has just announced that we're going to give 100 million, and we don't have 100 million. And I remember afterwards I went to him and I said, Chairman, I think there was a small mistake that needs to be corrected very quickly. The donation of 100 million, we don't have 100 million. And he said, yes, I know that. And I said, so how are we going to give 100 million? And he said, it's going to happen. I believe that one day we'll be able to give 100 million. And we didn't give 100 million, we gave over 200 million. And but once again, it taught me about faith. When you truly believe in that something will come to pass, and you really make it, you work towards making sure that it happens, and that's what happened in our lives. And so we saw the business being able to easily give away that capital to the foundation and continues to do so. So the reason I speak about it today is because we continue with the foundation. It's no longer the Shanduka Foundation, it's now the Cyril Ramaphosa Foundation. And the focus has always been on education. But what we did whilst still at Shanduka was that we started to focus on entrepreneurship. And I remember when Done, who heads up the foundation, when she came with this idea of going into entrepreneurship, I was thinking, I really wasn't getting it, and I thought, okay, it's fine. It didn't require a lot of money, so it seemed like an easy decision at the time. And when you're thinking of other things that you need to make a decision on, and this organization, just that idea that she had on entrepreneurship. So we have been calling it the Shanduka Black Umbrellas. And today we changed the name to Black Umbrellas. We now, in the businesses that we have, that are in the program, we now have businesses that are churning out a turnover of just over 2 billion rand. And in profitability, they are able to have profitability that's just over 300 million rand. And, and they employ thousands of people on a long-term basis. And the thing with this program is that it's a 3-year program. So what we didn't want were people who would have an idea and then, decide 6 months down the line they're bored with this idea. Because sometimes you have people who are just bored. They just want to try this, then try that, then try that. We wanted people who were really married and really focused on the idea and creating a business. And so it's so wonderful for us to see that we now have significant businesses that, you know, are able to produce significant revenue and profitability and also employ people on a long-term basis. Because for us, the reason we started Shanduka Black Umbrellas was because we're looking at employment. And we were saying, how are we going to address unemployment? How are we going to contribute to the issue of unemployment? Unemployment is an issue that we often think should only be addressed by big corporates. And yet, new businesses are started every day. Some of the businesses that you mentioned, they're like Sobe. You know, this is a business that never existed a few years ago. And today, it is a business that has got franchises. I'm one of their happy clients. They've got franchises all over the country, and they are employing so many people. I mean, and this is from an idea, you know? And so new businesses are important in dealing with this issue of employment, of unemployment that we face in the country. And so, sorry, that's my fiance. So that's something that's been important. We've also focused on education continuously. We continue to do the work in education. And I'm still very much involved with the Cyril Ramaphosa Foundation, because if there's one thing, if I can mention just 3 things, because I'm sure I'm running out of time, that have been important for me in my walk. Number 1, faith has been important. And I've seen it, I'm sure you've heard me mention it over and over again. It is so important to have faith in what you're doing and really, really believe in what you're doing. The second thing, hard work. Don't be afraid of hard work. You know, work hard and push into what you are doing. And, you know, and over time, you know, you can start to, you know, sort of balance things a bit and get more people who can do other parts of the work, but don't be afraid of working hard. The third thing that I would say to you is relationships. I value relationships. You know, recently when there was a radio station, they wanted to interview people that I had worked with. I was so thankful that I could give them phone numbers of people that I've known for years, including my Standard 2 English teacher, Mrs. Nix, who I'm still friends with. And she tells me I can call her Sandy now, but I still call her Mrs. Nix because it feels weird calling her by her first name. But, you know, it's just relationships are so important. And it's not about where that person is today, because you have no idea where they're going to be tomorrow. Thank you.